I realise I've talked about negatives and used that word quite a few times in this series, and it's another thing I haven't really explained. So I wanted to go into that and explain what a negative is. And really all it is, it's the film that was in the camera that captured the image at the time the photo was taken. And that can be like a flexible strip film, like some of us might remember, the old 35mm film, or earlier to that it was a larger format, so it came in sheets. It was not like a sheet of paper, but it was a sheet of film, and the later stuff was flexible, a gel type film, and the earlier stuff was glass, so a glass plate. But all of it works on the same principle. It's a surface that's been coated so that it reacts to light when it's exposed to light, and then it's developed with chemicals to fix the image so that it stays there and we get a photograph. That's what photography is all about. The thing about the negative is that it's called negative because when the light reacts with the plate or the film, it produces a negative image. So what is black in reality becomes white on the film and clear on the film, and what is white in reality becomes black or dark on the negative. It's just the way that the light reacts with the chemicals. That's what happens. You get a negative version of the image. The headache is you don't get a one-to-one negative. So black is white and white is black, but the shades of grey in the middle, and there's thousands of shades of grey in the middle, they don't translate in a one-to-one. So you don't get 99% grey doesn't come out as 1% on the film, and vice versa. They start to compress the image, so there's a lot less contrast in the actual negative when you look at it than there is in the original photograph. And what happens is when the film is used in the darkroom in an enlarger and projected onto photographic paper, the photographic paper has the opposite reaction to the light and the chemistry that the film does. So there's a sort of compression act. What happens is you big range of tones that you take in your photograph, in your scene, they get compressed down to a small range of tones on the film. And then when you put the film into the darkroom and project it onto paper, you get those small number of tones get expanded out to a larger number of tones, so you get something that looks like the original. It's a compression thing. I don't know if you remember the Dolby in the old days of cassettes, for music. If you played back a Dolby tape without turning the Dolby on your cassette deck, it didn't sound quite right. Well, that was the same sort of thing going on. It wasn't compressed. If it was compressed with Dolby, you had to decompress it with Dolby to listen to it, otherwise you didn't hear a true version. This is what I find with the negatives. So when I digitize them, that gives me a one-to-one representation, but what I see on my screen initially is like a compressed version of the original scene. So there's not as much tone, not as much contrast as the original photograph. And I have to do in digital what the paper used to do in the darkroom. I have to expand that limited range of tones on the film back into a wide range of tones in the picture. And that's the secret of digital photography and restoring these negatives, is working out how you're going to decompress a small amount of image that's stored back into an original finished photo. Herein lies an interesting issue, that because I don't know what the original photo actually looked like, my version of the photo, when I decompress it digitally and produce a photo, my photo may not look anything like the original that Mr. Beattie or Pop or any of the other photographers have actually done. And unless I can find an original of their print and compare it, I'm not going to get the same thing. And you sort of start to chase your own tail, thinking, well, should I be doing what they intended, or should I be doing my version of it to the best of my ability and honour their memory that way by making the best photo possible? And in the end, that's what I choose to do. I choose to do them in my style. And when I came into photography, I studied the works of photographers like Ansel Adams, who has this massive range of tones, and he has a whole system that he talks about in his books and things about how he gets that massive range of tones. And so those are the sorts of images that I like to look at, things with lots of contrast and lots of detail, lots of depth to them. So I try to produce those sort of images from the negatives of Mr. Beattie and Pop and the other photographers. A lot of people ask why I haven't done these photos in sepia. It's the brown sort of tones as opposed to black and white. And a lot of people think that sepia is more original. It's interesting because the sepia that we see today is actually selenium toning, not sepia. And the selenium process only came in the 1960s, so it's certainly not something that would have been used, back in Beattie's day in the 1800s. They did have a sepia toning process in the late 1800s, and that was done to make the photos last longer, because the prints were made from silver emulsion, and silver, as we know, tarnishes. I mean, if you've ever seen silverware at mum and dad's house in the on the dining room table, you've got to polish it every time you get it out before you can use it, because it goes this sort of black tarnished colour. Same problem with photographs. If you leave a silver gelatin photograph long enough, the silver will tarnish, and so the photo fades or becomes sort of this mirrored effect, really. It's not fading as such, but it becomes unviewable. In order to stop that process, they used a sepia toning, which replaced the metallic silver with another compound that didn't fade as much or didn't tarnish the way that silver does. So that's where sepia came from. The interesting thing is, I've found a couple of original Beattie photographs, Beattie prints, photographs that he printed himself, and none of those were sepia toned. They're all black and white. So I'm not sure if he was big on sepia, if that's what he intended. A lot of photographs in that day were hand coloured with oil paint, and the oil paint was applied over the photograph, and that's preserved them as well. So you could equally say colorized was more to his taste than sepia. And the truth is, we just don't know. There's not enough of his work, original prints surviving. There's plenty of the negatives, and plenty of copies of photos, but actual original prints handmade by Mr. Beattie himself, not so many. And you've just got to go with what we think is best. And this is back to that dilemma I talked about. And I think I'm producing the best images I can in my own style, based on the information that Beattie captured with his camera 100+ years ago.